Hello. Sorry for the late start. I promised my wife I would eat my lunch because I often forget, and I forgot. So I was trying to eat it really fast and obviously didn't finish it in time. I like to keep my promises to my wife, to everybody, but especially to her. I'm so sorry. I feel so embarrassed about this. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. Thank you all for your patience and understanding last week as my family was dealing with COVID, which is a whole thing, and was a miserable experience, including that I don't enjoy having to miss doing a stream. I have not done that frequently. I try not to. But I'm glad that we were able to figure out, apparently Zoe, who's wonderful, figured out how to replay one of our favorite streams from last year with Derek Dawson and Mike Wang. So that was great. My family is not completely in the clear, but almost there. I am testing negative, and so I'm out of isolation. I don't know that anybody needs all this update, but just in case anybody was thinking about it, I'll throw it out there. Anyway, I'm back, and I'm glad to be here. And this is the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I'm Brandon Tessers. I am a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. It is just a conversation, an open conversation with me and whoever's here. And like all conversations, the participants impact one another. The things that I say are going to impact you, and the things that you say and do are going to impact me. Obviously, that's primarily true for those of you who are going to be in the chat and saying things in the chat, because otherwise I only have my ideas and guesses about what you might be experiencing rather than the actual reality and knowledge of what you're experiencing. But that means if you want to ask questions, great, ask questions. But it also doesn't have to just be a Q&A. We're here to talk. Every week I choose a topic, and I have one today, just to start us off. And if people here want to talk about that, great. If they want to talk about something else, great. It doesn't need to stay within the context of where we started. I just like to have something to get us going so that it's not sitting around dead air chewing my lunch while we wait for people to ask things. I run a practice called Effective Artistry, a therapy and executive functioning coaching practice. That's our logo up there in the corner. We provide therapy to people in the state of Illinois and coaching services to people all over the world, literally. And I'm out of my rhythm, having been gone. Just as a fun little side note, when I got back after being out for 10 days with COVID, our website and our email was down. So I've spent the last 2 days where I thought I'd be getting back to people and catching up, trying to resolve that. And now I got to try and get back to everything that happened while I was out. So it's kind of nice to be here, this little oasis of calm in the middle of stressful things. Not that they're terribly difficult things to deal with, but, they're not the things that I would prefer to be dealing with. I think that's basically the most important stuff. If you do comment, I try to be good about not saying anybody's names from the chat, but it is publicly viewable, so just be aware of that. If you want to be anonymous, don't use your Facebook account and don't use your YouTube account, because that's your Gmail account, unless you create, fake ones to hide your name. Yeah, okay. Let's get going as I try and get the rest of my lunch. So here's what we're going to start by talking about today. And I've attempted this in the past, and I'm going to attempt it again, because not succeeding at something doesn't mean that you don't try it again, right? Any of you who've been around and watched for a long time know that I'm not real big on or good at marketing, branding, advertising, whatever. I don't feel comfortable selling myself. I'm not the most concise person. I don't really do well with elevator pitches. And the whole point of everything that we do is that it's complicated. All of it, not just what we do, but what your problems are, what you're experiencing, what might help. It's all complicated. None of it fits into a little thing. Of course, what we're trying to do in regards to marketing, but really all the time, all of us, is demonstrate enough value get enough intrigue for people to pay attention to the next thing. And then that one demonstrates enough value to pay attention to the next thing, and so on and so forth. That's why the first line of the book is so important, right? By the time you're 8 pages in, if you write a line that the reader doesn't so much like, well, if they like everything that's come up since then, they'll keep going. But if they read the first line and they don't like it, they're not going to be sticking around. Oh, a comment already. I'm distracting myself. I should finish what I'm saying and then I'll look at the comment. So recently we contracted with a marketing company, really cool people. I like their approach and I'm happy to be working with them. And of course, they want to know how to, what makes us different or unique or valuable, or, the kinds of questions that matter with that kind of stuff. And they asked if there was anything that they could look at that would tell them that. So that's what we're starting with here today. Is I'm going to try and talk about that here so that they can look at this as a resource, and for me to practice getting better at, and for me to, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that is different than unique and valuable, I don't know, valuable, hopefully, but again, don't know. And that's kind of the point. But anyway, is that we pay attention to what's happening. We're not looking to fit things into boxes, just looking closely enough to be able to categorize a person or an issue as, oh, it's this, which means we got to do this, and it will result in this. Nothing is that simple. And that means that right now, even though I have an idea that I'm going to talk about these things, and I will, but the best way I can demonstrate what we do is to do it. And somebody put a comment in the chat, so I'm going to read that and we're going to address it. If it's a thing that's meant to be addressed anyway, sometimes they're not. Having trouble. I'll read it. Well, I'll read it out loud. I'm having a lot of trouble lately approaching tasks that I know I can do, but I don't have the spell slots to structure for myself, and everyone I could ask for help from is on vacation. I don't know how to convince myself to approach these tasks when they need to be done, but I can't dredge up the energy. All right. You are here a lot and you know me well enough that I think you know what I'm going to say first, and you're not going to like it, but then we'll talk more and see if there's anything you like after that. I don't know how to convince myself to approach these tasks when they need to be done, but I can't dredge up the energy. So that statement, what you're saying is your theory about the problem. You're saying the problem is there's something I need to be doing and I'm not doing it. Your theory about why the problem is a problem, or what you could change in order to resolve the problem, is that you're not getting yourself to try. I need to convince myself to approach these tasks. But in the same sentence, you're also saying, I don't have the energy. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Something you provide that is really valuable to me is that you don't make assumptions and you take the time to define things in a shared language. That's very helpful. And actually, this a great example. Thank you for saying that. I like to know what people find valuable. It feels nice, but it's also helpful to me to know what things are valuable to people. And of course, you're helping me intentionally, consciously helping me with the task of trying to define for the marketing people what is valuable here. And I appreciate that. And that's the real answer to your question. I won't skip to that. We'll talk about the other stuff in between, but that's the real answer to your question. Sometimes you can't do a thing and you need somebody else to help you, or it's just not going to get done. And I know you said in there that the people who would normally help you, everyone you could ask for help from is on a vacation. So I get it. I'm not saying it's that simple. I'm saying that sometimes you can't solve a problem. It doesn't matter what you do to try to convince yourself to approach it. You can try and motivate yourself or convince yourself or whatever all you want to lift 1,000 pounds. You're not going to do it because you just can't. So either that 1,000 pounds isn't going to get moved, or other people are going to help you with it, or other people are going to do it without you. And you might be able to get people to help you with it or ask people to take care of it for you. And sometimes people do stuff even when you're not asking them to. I didn't ask for your help with this thing. I just shared what my experience is, what it is that I'm trying to accomplish, and what my experience of trying to accomplish that is. And because you and I have a relationship, whatever that relationship is, I know parasocial, all these things, whatever, but in your particular case, and I'm not calling out names because I don't do that, but you've been around, we've talked, we have a relationship. I mean, in the chat, not that we've talked face to face, that you're here because there's something interesting or valuable to you in being here with me. which means that you pay attention to me, which means that when I'm struggling or have something I need to deal with, you're aware of it. And if you can help, you're going to want to. Just like if I'm paying attention to you, if I'm here with you, I'm paying attention to you, and you're struggling with something and I'm aware of it because I'm paying attention to you, I'm going to want to help with it. This is how it is supposed to work. This is how humans are evolved. We are not meant to do anything individually. There are benefits to being able to do some things in isolation to a certain extent, because nothing can be done completely individually. And yes, that is a bit hyperbolic and philosophical. And I already forgot that I was supposed to be trying to do like marketing friendly stuff. But yeah, that's hyperbolic, that nobody does anything independently, but it's also true. The issue when we're talking about getting help, doing something independently versus getting help from somebody else, is what we're defining as help. Did you make the clothes that you are wearing? Probably not. Did you grow the food that you eat? Probably not. Did you build the building that you're sitting in, or the furniture that you're using, or the internet connection? No. If you did any one of those things, you didn't do the others, probably. So no, you're not doing anything, including just sitting there without help from anybody else. What we're talking about is the immediacy of the help. And I know this isn't your question. I'm just kind of exploring this part of it first. And then I will get to stuff that I hope will be helpful to you. Well, I hope this is helpful to you, or I wouldn't be saying it. Even when you're sitting there in your bed, feeling as though you're not doing anything and nobody cares about you and whatever, somebody made that bed. I mean, constructed it, not made it, like arranged the sheets and blanket. So we're talking about the immediacy of the help, meaning, am I aware of the person who helped me and the ways in which they are helping me? Am I aware of the cost to them of helping me and the value to them of helping me? When I say that someone else made your clothes, that's help, people are going to mostly say, no, I bought my clothes. Somebody made them and sold them, and I traded them money in exchange for the clothes. Sure. But that's about how you're defining the word help. Could you have done it without their efforts? No. They contributed to it. They supported you in it. They are vital to the, I don't know, whatever you want to say. You didn't do it on your own. Nobody does. You can't. But in our culture specifically, and I'm talking about American culture, but I think this is largely true of kind of Western culture generally, we love hyper-individualism, that the only thing that matters is the individual. That if you're doing well, it's because you did good things to make it happen. And if you're doing poorly, it's because you did bad things to make it happen. So I know that you've already explored this and you've already been clear and said, I don't have anyone I can ask for help right now. That's not actually the part of it I'm focused on right now, because you just told me. If you hadn't said it, I would have asked about those things, and you knew well enough to like anticipate that and say, I'm talking about, I don't know how to convince myself to approach these tasks when they need to be done, but I can't dredge up the energy. That is still hyper-individualism. You're looking at, I want these tasks to be done. They need to be done as shorthand for, if these tasks aren't done, it will have consequences or contribute to experiences that I really, really want to avoid. They will be painful in some way, right? So there are these tasks that you want to be accomplishing because you want the consequences of accomplishing them, or to avoid the consequences of failing to accomplish them. And it's not happening. So that's a problem. Things are different than you want it to be. And what we do, what the human brain does at all times, when we are aware of something that is different than we want it to be, that is uncomfortable, it causes distress, we want to resolve it. And there are different ways to do it. One way is to do something about the material reality of the problem, to change it so that it becomes more in line with what you would want it to be. One is to work on changing what you want to be so that it comes more in line with what already is. One is to change your perception so that even though the material reality of the thing doesn't change, your perception of it does change, and therefore now you're perceiving it to be something more in line with what you want it to be. The only other thing you can do to solve a problem, and I would say this last one is the one that people pay the least amount of attention to because they don't consider it a solution, but it's also the thing we do by far the most commonly, most frequently, is to stop being aware of the problem. For it to be a problem, you have to be aware of something that is different than you want it to be. There are many, 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 many things that are different than you want them to be that you're just not thinking of at any given time. And therefore, those things aren't causing you distress, right? In this case, you want to change what's happening. You want to change the material reality of the thing. You want to do the task because that will bring it in line with what you want to be happening, right? But you are incapable right now. Capability is not static. It is contextual. Something that you're capable of doing in one context, you are not capable of doing in another context. We talk about this. Well, maybe this is a good thing to talk about for the marketing. We talk about this in terms of cost. That at the root of it, and yes, it's a little ridiculous to say, I obviously like hyperbole to make my points. Anything that any human is capable of doing, any other human is capable of doing, because if nothing else, at the worst case scenario, hypothetically, they could get the first person to do it for them, right? No matter what, you're looking at saying, oh, look, this person is capable of running a 4-minute mile. I am not. Okay, but you could get them to run a 4-minute mile for you. And yes, this is about that help and that support, right? But it's about what it would cost you. Well, that person that runs a 4-minute mile every day, it doesn't cost them that much. It costs them 4 minutes and whatever amount of energy that it costs them. And of course, you could talk about it as all the work that they've done to get to that point. It costs them that too. But at this point, to run a 4-minute mile, it costs them 4 minutes and whatever amount of energy and whatever time to prep and to cool down. I'm not a runner, so I could not tell you the details. For me to run a 4-minute mile would cost, I don't know, years of training, maybe not ever be possible. But maybe when I was 12, if I had done something differently, I could have. So capability is not static. It doesn't follow you context to context throughout the course of your life. Doing a thing costs you something. And of course, again, the vast majority of things cost more than you have the resources to be able to afford. You can't do everything that would cost you your entire life to do, right? But those costs go up and down based on the context. Right now, what you're saying is the energy cost, what it would cost you to be able to do these things, it would cost you more energy than you have available to you. That means you can't do it in this context. That means you can't do it. There's no way of talking to yourself or motivating yourself or whatever to manage to come up with that energy. Now, the more practical answer, of course there are changes that you can make. Otherwise, what would be the point, right? Of course there are changes that you can make. It's just not about convincing yourself to do it. You can try to free up that energy by evaluating where else it's going and seeing what else you can scale back on, either by just letting go of it completely, getting somebody else to help take care of it or lower the cost in some way for you. Or yes, sometimes making changes to the way you do things, learning new skills, new information, developing new systems so that things become less costly. And that way you can keep accomplishing everything you're accomplishing, but have more stuff left over for this stuff that you're currently running out of, or running out of energy before you get to it, right? And that includes these tasks themselves, maybe, and I'm just throwing random numbers on this stuff. I know it's ridiculous, but to make the point, maybe it costs you 10 points of energy to do this thing, or it would, and you only have 3 points of energy available. Yeah, maybe there are ways to bring that cost down to 3 points so that you can afford to do it. But whatever those ways are specific to the specific thing that you're trying to do. I can't tell you that there's some generic, if you just say this to yourself, you'll be able to accomplish anything, which is part of the reason that I'm terrible at marketing and honestly don't like a lot of how other people do some of this marketing. When you promise people that there are simple solutions to complicated problems, it will never work. So that means that entire business model is based around being able to blame the person trying to enact the solution for doing it incorrectly. Meaning, if I say to you, for example, I'll try and stay away from like actual ones. I'm not trying to because all these things are helpful to people. I'm not trying to tear anything down. But if I were to say, here is my book, I have 10 simple steps for parenting. And if you do these 10 things, you will have a great relationship with your child and there will never be any problems. Well, inevitably there will be problems. But if I've made those 10 steps either vague or impossible or whatever, pay deep attention to your child, which is a thing that I do actually say and care about. But then if there's a problem, I say, well, you didn't pay deep enough attention. Or I can make the task so difficult that really nobody can actually do it. And then when it doesn't work, I say, well, did you do it exactly the way that I said, or did you cut some corners? And they're going to say, oh, yeah, I cut some corners because you had to, but now you're back here. Oh, the reason I'm not getting the task done is because I'm not motivated. I'm not convincing myself to do it. It's your fault in some way. And it's not. So I can't give you a generic answer to that. I can tell you that when you don't have the energy, you don't have the energy. So as the most generic I can say is go do the things that give you energy, whether that's sleeping or eating, or whether that's engaging in activities that are enjoyable for you. People tend to think about, oh, I should be doing this and I can't, and I'm procrastinating by doing this other stuff, and I'm distracting myself as though the stuff that you're doing instead is problematic. It isn't. You want to do the first thing, or you wouldn't be feeling distress about the fact that you haven't done it. You're doing the fun, the distraction stuff instead, and then you're interpreting that as a failure of yours, a moral failure, a moral weakness of yours, as opposed to what it actually is. To do the thing that I want to do that's causing me distress costs more resources than I have. So I need to go get some resources from somewhere, and I'm going to do that by engaging in the things that energize me. So that glitch, that incorrect, that logical flaw of, oh, doing the things that give me the energy that I need in order to be able to do the things that I'm supposed to do or need to do or whatever. Doing those things is bad. So now I stop myself from doing those things. I'm still not doing the thing that I'm supposed to do, but I'm not doing the things that I want to do either, because that's bad, and I'm not letting myself distract myself. I'm punishing myself. Then where are you going to get the energy from? It's got to come from somewhere. You got to get it back somehow. And sitting there forcing yourself not to do the things that you want to be doing is not only not restoring energy to you, it's draining even more. Impulse control requires energy. To have an impulse, to be aware of it, to make a determination that you don't want to actually engage in that impulse, and then to enforce that decision on yourself. The executive functioning processes involved in all that is draining. So now you're getting more and more tired more and more quickly, and less able to do the thing. So we could say cut yourself some slack, or we could say rest is productive because it allows you to be productive. And those are helpful things. But the truth is that when you're saying one thing is productive and one thing isn't, it's about how you're defining productivity. One is not inherently more valuable than the other. Anyway, it doesn't help that everyone is working remotely. It's really difficult and frustrating to reach out for help in these circumstances. Yeah, I'll come back to that. I just read Robert Frost's Mask of Reason that talks about the book of Job and the disconnect between how good of a Christian you are and your lot in life. It's a fun satire. I'm not familiar with that, I'm assuming poem, Robert Frost, but I am familiar with the book of Job, and that is interesting. I'm just reading through them all, and then we'll come back. My EA elevator statement, I regularly introduce EA to individuals when I recognize high IQ, is the This Is Not Therapy Hour is a great free podcast with one of the world's top experts on neurodiverse people. Interesting. And yes, that's my father making that comment, but I appreciate it. And it's also not accurate, but I'll clarify. ADHD is not a deficiency. It's a marker of intelligence. Purposefully, there is no specific agenda. Brandon and his guests are there to respond to your questions. He and his guests can help you raise your gifted and talented children. He can help you as a gifted and talented individuals to make the changes you wanted to see. Cool. I like all that. Oh, it's a short play, not a poem. I'll have to look into it. The Mask of Reason. Thank you again for helping, Dad. My dad's a brilliant guy. And, we were talking actually just recently about my memories of being 11 years old and being awake in the front seat because he and I are night owls, and we were driving to California to visit family, and my mom and brother would be sleeping in the back seat, and he and I would be talking about philosophy and consciousness. And, when I say I come by it naturally, yeah, I've been thinking about and talking about this stuff since I was 11. Does that make me one of the foremost experts, top experts on neurodiverse people in the world? Definitely. No, I don't know. It makes me what I am, and what I am and what I do is helpful in the ways that it's helpful, and it's not helpful in the ways that it's not, and things that are helpful for some aren't helpful for others, and whatever. I know a lot about this stuff for sure, and feedback seems to be consistent that it is helpful even from other experts. Ugh, see, I don't like this. I don't like it. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And that's the point of hiring. That's the point of getting help, right? That's the point of community. That's the point of hiring marketing people is I don't have to do the marketing. They know how to do it. I just need to give them the information that they need in order to be able to do their job as well as possible. And so rather than trying to figure out how to phrase it, I'm just going to do what I do and they can figure out how to phrase it. That's the point, hopefully. And if you're watching this right now, I don't mean that to be like, figure it out. I just mean I'm not going to try and do something that I don't know how to do well. Yes, reaching out for help costs something. Everything that you do, everything you could do, everything any person ever could do has a cost associated with it, including anything that you can do that might decrease the cost of something else has a cost in and of itself, including asking for help. That's funny. So at all times, it's an evaluation, the cost and the value. That what does it cost me to ask for the help? What is the value of me asking for help? Not what is the value of getting the help, that figures into it, but it's also how likely is it that someone's going to respond to my request for help with actually trying to help? Then how valuable would that help be? So no, I'm not going to go around asking people for help that I don't think are going to help me. Why would I waste my resources in that way? I won't even consider it. When I'm struggling and I'm feeling low and feeling depressed or whatever, I don't think, I should go talk to strangers at the grocery store. Why would my brain waste resources considering that? It's going to think about what people might, the value of asking them for help would equate to or surpass the cost of doing it. And yes, everyone working remotely can make that a lot harder. It can make it easier too. Partly some of the reasons it might be making it harder or easier has to do with a person and how you operate and your patterns of communication. But there are other things that can be changed more easily, not just written off as, oh, I'm the kind of person for whom this is more difficult. And we can explore that stuff. But yeah, there's a cost. And part of that is the risk. And here's a terrible reality. The more resources you invest into accomplishing something, the worse you will feel if you fail to accomplish it, which is a backwards way of saying, the kind of thing that everybody says with pop psychology, like, oh, I'd rather not try because if I don't try, I can't fail kind of thing, right? Gifted kid syndrome, colloquial, it's often talked about that way. The more you invest your resources into something, in other words, the harder you try, the more of your time and energy and attention and awareness that you invest into accomplishing something, the worse you will feel if you fail to accomplish it. Now, all of this is up for debate and definition and redefinition. What does it mean to fail? What does it mean to accomplish it? And yeah, that's some of where the value can be, is re-exploring, was it a failure? I mentioned at the beginning of this, if I approach this by saying, okay, I'm going to try and do some stuff for the marketing, the value of marketing again, and I've tried to do it in the past, but it's never been, what people were asking for or good enough or whatever. If I define that as failure, which means that I've got to narrow the constraints about what I'm trying to do and the opportunities I have to do it, I didn't accomplish the thing I was trying to accomplish in that particular moment. If I call that failure, then my brain, which is trying to not spend resources, right? Trying to make things simple, even though nothing actually is simple. We're trying to make it as complicated as it needs to be and not an iota more complicated than that. We'll simplify it and say, yeah, I fail. When I try to talk about marketing, I fail. And so why would then I try to do it again? I've tried it before, I failed. You all have done this yourselves, and you've all done this with other people, I am sure, that they say, oh, here's the problem. And you say, oh, what about this? And they say, I tried that once and it didn't go well. As though because it didn't go well in that context, it will never go well and is therefore not worth trying. It might not be worth trying. You try it once and it doesn't work. Yeah, the value, my perception of the value is going to go down. It's less likely to be helpful. I think it's less likely that it will be helpful, in part because I have evidence that at least in one situation, it wasn't helpful. I'm not going to walk away from that thinking it's going to be more helpful next time. But there's a world of difference between less likely and no possibility. So I try again. Now, I could also redefine failure. Besides that, I could say, okay, maybe I failed at that particular thing I was trying to accomplish, that particular request someone had made of me, but there's still value in what I did. Probably, almost always, there's going to be value in the specific thing you're trying to accomplish. In other words, it's not all or nothing. You either accomplish it completely or don't accomplish anything. The attempt itself, more often than not, is going to get you some of what you were trying to do. And even if not, the experience will enable you the next time you try something similar to do that more efficiently. You have experience, you have information, even if, the famous Edison quote, I know 297 things that don't work, or whatever the quote is. So now I'm not calling it a failure anymore, and I don't feel bad anymore because I've reframed it in that way. The reality of what's happened doesn't change. What happened, but the way that I'm looking at it, the way that I'm conceptualizing it does change. So they're all on vacation, and therefore it's not worth not worth spending the cost of reaching out for help. Yeah, okay. That, of course, how would I know any different, or how would anybody else know any different? And that doesn't mean that it's always and forever. Vacations typically end. And it doesn't mean that there aren't other people that you could try. And it doesn't mean that there are. And it just means that that one isn't an option. So let's move on from it. Why would I try to convince you that the thing you said won't work might work? No, it's not going to work. You tell me, okay, so let's figure out what else might then. I will do this for the marketing, partly because this one tickles my fancy a little bit. I talk a lot about the sticky answer, which I think is a very corny way to phrase it, but for some reason it's delightful to me to phrase it in such a corny way. The sticky answer is an answer that is theoretically helpful. It is accurate, theoretically helpful, but not practically useful. Meaning, I have a problem, right? Like we defined earlier. I am aware of something that's different than I want it to be. Of course, it could also be that I'm aware of something that might be different, might happen differently than I would want it to, or might mean something different than I would want it to mean. But I'm aware of something that is different than I want it to be. So to resolve that problem, I have those 4 variables I can look at. Be less aware of it, change the material reality of the thing, change my perception of the thing, or change what I want. And I've already lost what I was saying. Oh, the sticky answer. Another very important part of what we do, cognitive miser theory. The brain does not spend resources unless it has a reason to do so. It's a bit of a tangent, but I'm going to say it. A lot of the time I get questions, especially in regards to marketing, about what makes you different from other people. And I always say, I don't know, because I don't know nearly enough about what other people do. I can't say what everybody in the world does. I can tell you what I do, and I can tell you the things that I've gotten feedback from people are different about what I do, but that doesn't mean that it actually is, right? It might be. And also it could be that other people do things very similar, and I don't know about them and they don't know about me. So we both kind of, convergent evolution. We arrived at similar conclusions independently of one another. And I lost it again. What was I talking about there? Oh, the simple answer. Cognitive miser theory. So this is a thing that I am aware of other people putting a lot of value on that I think not only doesn't have value, but actually is actively harmful. And I'll be clear, anything that is common is commonly helpful. I'm not ever trying to take away something that is helpful to somebody. If somebody comes in and says, I've been in so much distress because I just lost my pet, but I went and saw this medium and they channeled the spirit of my pet and I was able to get some closure and talk with them. Why would I want to come in and say, yeah, no, that sounds fake. That sounds made up. I don't know, even though personally, I probably wouldn't do that myself. I don't find the value in it. Doesn't mean that there isn't value in it for other people. So I don't know. B, even if I did, even if I could definitively prove that what their belief is, the belief that they're having that is helpful to them, is inaccurate, why would I want to spend any of my resources taking something away from somebody that's helpful? I might want to take away stuff that's harmful. That's the sticky answer stuff that, we'll work our way back around to that. I might want to take away something that's harmful, but even if it's harmful, or if I think it might be harmful in this particular context, it still must be helpful in some other context, or the concept wouldn't exist. Why would anybody have come up with it or spread it or shared it or continued it if it never helped anybody ever? So it helps people, but it might not help it might not help you. And in particular, it might help people who have the power to make it more common, even though it is not commonly helpful. But I don't know how much we get into the revolutionary side of things when we're talking about marketing. So this is one of those things, is the idea of the subconscious. I really don't like the idea of the subconscious. There is a cognitive bias, and I like talking about cognitive biases, but these have the same issue. There's a cognitive bias, which basically just means that if we're paying attention to something, we think it must be important, because we can't pay attention to everything. So our brain is making determinations at all times about what is worth paying attention to and what isn't. So anything we notice, we by definition have some reason to believe that it's important. The bias then is when we lose track of the fact that sometimes we're wrong. It's not just that we think it's important and therefore we're paying attention to it. It's we're paying attention to it because it is important. And that leads to a lot of other biases, in particular, the one we're talking about right now, subconscious. Brandon is anti-Freudian, put that on the brochure. I like that. And my real feelings about Freud are more complicated, because everything is useful within the limits that it's useful within. Anyway, sticky answer and cognitive bias. And yes, we overestimate our role in things always, because we're more aware of our own role in things than anything else. Even if we do a lot of work to be aware of systemic or contextual factors or relational or whatever, we're still going to know more about ourselves, be more aware of the information about ourselves than anything else. It's part of what was happening in that initial question, right? Things are going differently than I want them to. It's because I'm not thinking correctly. What can I say to myself? How do I convince myself that if I just think differently, that magically that'll make everything different? And of course, sometimes it does. Otherwise, we would give up on it pretty quick. In fact, most often it does. In fact, anything you do that causes you a problem and yet you continue to do it over and over and over, that means that when you do it, the vast majority of the time it's helpful to you. We adapt very quickly. If every time you did a thing it hurt you, you stop doing it very quickly. If you continue to do something that's causing you problems, it's because you're misapplying something that is usually helpful to you, but in this context it's not. And you're missing the distinction. So you keep applying something that's usually helpful in a context in which it is not. And that's the pattern that's repeating, is that you're missing the distinction. But if you overfocus on yourself and your role in things, I just overthink things, I am lazy, I procrastinate, all of which are accurate statements, because that's what those words mean. They just don't really enable you to do anything differently. So my problem with the subconscious, the concept of the subconscious, is not that it exists or doesn't exist. Obviously, it is incredibly important to me that people understand that the vast majority of the things that you do, that your brain does, that your body does, that you do, vast majority, you have no conscious awareness of them. And yes, that includes autonomic systems and processes, like your heart beating and whatever, breathing and whatever. But it's more than that. Even if I consciously choose to pick up this mug and take a sip of tea, which I'm doing, I am not at any point in there consciously sending electrical signals from the brain to the muscles and to the nerves in order for them to activate in the specific way that they need to. The hand-eye coordination, the data I'm taking in visually that I then correlate with proprioception of how and where exactly I need to put my hand to grab the handle, and how the gravity is affecting and the weight distribution, and how tightly to hold it that I don't drop it, but not so tightly that I hurt, or I can't. Neither can you. None of us can. So even in things that we're consciously doing, the vast majority of the elements that are actually required to do that, we do without conscious awareness. The only exception to that is thinking, because thinking is conscious. So every element of it happens within consciousness. anything that happens within consciousness originates outside of it. We don't know the specific mechanics of how I developed a thought. The thought just arrived. By the time I became aware of it, it was already a thought. I can come up with theories about what happened or how I came up with the thought, but I can't actually observe it and experience it consciously, right? I'm getting really philosophical. Maybe that's my brand, tangents and philosophy. So the reason I don't like the subconscious is because it assumes active intent on things that are not active and have no intent. A good example of this is the word assumption. We say you make an assumption as though it is a thing that you do. And it's exactly the opposite. An assumption is something that you don't actually pay attention to. Right now, I and you, until I say this out loud, we are assuming that gravity will continue to exist in its current state for the next 30 seconds. I know we're assuming that because if I didn't think that was going to happen, or if you didn't think that was going to happen, if we thought there was some risk that gravity was going to just change all of a sudden 30 seconds from now, I would be doing different things than what I'm currently doing. So we can tell by what I'm doing, oh, I must not have thought that gravity was going to change, meaning I'm making an assumption that it's not worth paying attention to gravity and what I might need to do if it changed all of a sudden. Did you actively make an assumption about gravity? Of course not. All of this stuff happens outside of consciousness, and it's not static, meaning that there are things that sometimes you would say is worth paying attention to, and other times it's not. It's not that simple. We can't look at patterns and say, oh, you self-sabotage. No, you wanted to do something and you failed. You didn't have to actively make yourself fail. You just failed. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes the weight is heavier than you can lift. Sometimes the task requires more energy than you have available to you. But we don't like that. We don't like this idea that there are things that we are genuinely incapable of doing. That's scary. It's much more comfortable to think instead, oh no, I could do it. And the only reason I didn't do it or I'm not doing it is because I am making myself not do it. Either way, if I do it, I've chosen to do it. If I don't do it, I've chosen not to do it. So that's why I don't like the concept of the subconscious. It's because of the connotations. And yes, that includes even the wording itself, subconscious, sub, below, beneath, prior to. It implies secrecy. It implies things happening under the surface. That's often how it's talked about, right? That consciousness is the tip of the iceberg, that most of what you're thinking happens underneath the surface where you can't observe it, and it's sneaky and it's scary and it's dangerous. The brain does all kinds of stuff without conscious awareness. The only goal that your brain has, unless you are consciously intervening, the only thing that you want subconsciously that anybody wants is to survive. That's it. Desire is a conscious thing. You cannot have a subconscious desire. You can do things, say things, if you repeatedly, for example, say, I want to do this, but then your behavior doesn't line up because you're doing the things that prevent you from doing it, or you're failing to do the things that would help you do it. So it's easy and convenient to then say, well, I guess you don't really want it. No, you do. Consciously, you want it. But wanting a thing does not enable you necessarily to do the thing or to have the thing. So are you self-sabotaging? Or did you just not know what it was going to take for you to be able to get the outcome that you wanted? We call this hindsight bias too, right? That after the fact, I can look back and say, if I had just done this, then it would have gone the way I wanted it to. Yeah, and that's often true, sometimes not. Well, I should say accurate, not true, because how would we actually know? But, theoretically, it's accurate that if you had done this other thing, that it would have gone the way you wanted it to go. And then why didn't you do it? Because you're self-sabotaging? Or because the only way to know that doing that thing would have that outcome is to have the information that you didn't have at the time? If you knew then what you know now, yes, you could have done it differently. But you didn't know that at the time. If you did, you probably would have done it that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be caused distress by what happened. In other words, we made an assumption that this was what I had to do in order to get what I wanted. And we're wrong. all the time. We think I'll do X, Y, and Z, and that will result in A, B, and C. So we do X, Y, and Z, but then we don't get A, B, and C. And then after the fact, we look back and say, oh, I see now what I missed. But then that often gets translated into, oh, what's wrong with me? As though I intentionally chose to not know the information that I needed to know. So how do I convince myself to do the thing that I don't have the energy to do? You don't have the energy to do it. How do I just choose to be happy? Everybody at all times wants to be happy. That's what happy means. It's an enjoyable state of being by definition. Being sad or unhappy or whatever negative emotion is an unenjoyable state of being by definition. If you enjoy being sad, then you're not really sad. You're enjoying it, right? So that's not sad. Yeah, everybody wants to be happy. If you can do that by just choosing to do it, then you will. And sometimes you can. Sometimes you can think differently, reframe. We're talking about this stuff. I'm not saying that this stuff isn't possible. I'm saying it's impossible to know in advance. That, to me, is the key. Well, maybe it's the key difference. I don't know. I don't know what everybody does, but maybe this is the key difference. Whether it's a difference or not, it's the key is I can't know what will happen. Everybody else is trying to figure out, how can I know what will happen? If I didn't know what was going to happen, it's because I didn't know something that somebody else could. The idea that somebody out there could have predicted everything and known exactly what to do. No, that can't be done. So that's one side of it. But then if you say that, a lot of people will then come and say, well, if you can't know what's going to happen, then what's the point in trying anything? You have no control and life is chaos, then just do whatever the hell you want to do and don't worry about it. Which, okay, great, except that we don't have that option. Right? Like, I can't not make assumptions. It's not physically possible. I would have to pay attention to not only literally every piece of data that exists in the universe, but also every possible combination and outcome of the interactions of those things. No, we have to make assumptions. So I like to talk about it as what's worth trying. Generally, people are focused on what will work, including in this work, in therapy work, in coaching. What will work? Here's my problem. You're the expert. If I tell you about my problem, you're supposed to be able to tell me what will work. And of course, what we're aiming to do, if we're helpful people, if we're helpful therapists and coaches, we are trying to do everything that we think might be helpful. But if we think that it is possible to know what will work in advance, there is no good outcome. Not for the therapist, not for the client, not for any person as an individual. If I experience something that I don't like, and I believe that there is a way to know how to make sure that that never happens again, well, I got to go find who might know it, because obviously I don't, or I wouldn't have had that experience. So if I think it's possible, that means I think somebody else has the information. Now I got to go find them. And maybe I find somebody that, oh yeah, Brandon, he's an expert. He knows lots of stuff. Cool. He'll tell me what to do. So let's say that I do. I say, oh yeah, this will work. Do this and that'll work. And then you go and do it. Does it work? Maybe. And maybe not. If it does, well, I just reinforced your premise. Your whole premise here is that the only reason you experienced the bad thing is because there's something you were lacking, some information, some skill, some ability that you didn't have, meaning I would never experience that problem because I have the information. You experienced it because you didn't. Now I gave you the information and now you're not going to experience it anymore. But that reinforces the idea that all of your problems are your fault, a result of your deficiency. And we can debate, and people do, about what deficiency that is. Is it you don't care enough, or is it you have some medical condition, or etc.? This is what neurodiversity is a response to, the idea, the deficit model, that people only experience bad things because they are in some way deficient. Sometimes we experience bad things because no matter what we wanted to do or try, we just couldn't avoid it. It wasn't possible. So if it works, great, but you're now reinforced in your idea that you don't know how to navigate your life and your problems are your fault. And you're now reinforced in the idea that the way to solve those problems is to get advice from an expert, particularly me, because I just gave you some that worked. So why wouldn't you come back to the same place? So you put me up on a pedestal And then I am feeling this pressure that everything I got to do has to work because that's the value that you have in me, is that I can tell you what will work. Well, what if I tell you something that doesn't work? Oh my God, then you won't find me valuable anymore. And that's terrifying for me. And so what does that really mean? I'm putting pressure on you. Because if you tell me that what I suggested worked, I'll feel good. And if you tell me that what I suggested didn't work, I'll feel bad. You don't want to make me feel bad, right? Now, what if the thing didn't work in the first place? Okay. One possible response to that is, wow, even this expert, if you still respect me, even this expert who helps people like me, even what he said didn't work for me. So I'm so deficient, I'm so broken that even the stuff that works for other people who are deficient and broken like me doesn't work for me. I guess I'm just that much worse, right? That's one response. Another is, rather than taking it on as your failure, you make it my failure. That, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That was terrible advice. Cool. And that's fair. It didn't work. But then what? You go find somebody else instead, and you're just in an endless cycle of looking for someone who can tell you the answers to things. It doesn't exist. And I'm not trying to take that away to make it sound bleak. I'm trying to take that away to give you a sense of relief. There isn't a way to know how to do this all correctly from the jump. There isn't a way to resolve your anxiety so that you never feel anxious again. You will feel anxious again. There are things that we can do that will hopefully make it so that you experience your anxiety less frequently, that when you experience it, it's less intense, less disruptive to your life, that the impact of it causes fewer problems, that you're able to get out of it quicker or handle it better. Yeah, we can make changes. But if you're talking about it as any experience of it again later shows that, what's the point? Well, now we're back to, the more you try, the more effort you put in, the more resources you expend and still fail, the worse you feel. Most people who struggle with a lot of anxiety, this is a completely unfounded statement. I shouldn't say most people. Many people, in my experience, who struggle with a lot of anxiety, a good, large proportion of that anxiety is anxiety about what it is about them that makes them experience anxiety. The thing happens, I don't like it. But now, oh my gosh, what is it about me that made it so that I subconsciously made the thing happen that I didn't like? Why do I keep self-sabotaging myself? You just failed. This is why we focus on executive functioning, because the conscious intention to do a thing and then the actual actions that need to happen with your brain and your body in order for that thing to be done, not to mention all the impact that other things outside of you have on what happens. There's a gap between those two things. I intend to walk to the closet and grab a snack, and I trip and I fall. Did I intend to trip and fall? No. Did I subconsciously make myself trip and fall because somehow subconsciously I wanted to trip and fall? No. My brain was just spending the minimum resources it thought was necessary to accomplish the task, and it was wrong. It missed something. Something went unseen, and I tripped and I fell. That doesn't mean I wanted it. So executive functioning is the technical definition. Executive functioning is the hypothetical set of cognitive processes that allow a person to control their own behavior. In other words, I have a conscious intention to walk to the closet and get a snack. All of the things that need to happen in order for that to occur, all the specific data that needs to be taken in and instruction given to muscles and whatever, I'm not aware of all that. That's all happening in this black space. That's why we call it a black box. That's why we call it hypothetical. We don't actually know what's happening there because we can't observe it. But we know what the intention is, and we know what the result is. I intended to get a snack, I tripped. And then we reverse engineer in that, what we're calling executive functioning, what happened that went from this was my intention to this is what happened, and it was different than what I intended. That's when we're talking about executive dysfunction. Something went wrong. But again, vast majority of the time, it doesn't. And I'm talking about, I'm sitting in my chair. I'm not falling out of it. And maybe that's ridiculous, but my brain and my body are having to do things to make sure that happens. If they did certain other things, if I did certain other things, it wouldn't. I would fall out of the chair. But we don't notice the things that aren't causing problems. We notice the problems. So I guess that's a way of talking about what might be unique. I don't like subconscious. It's not sneaky. It's not subordinate to. It's not less important than. I don't even like non-conscious because that centers consciousness. It means that what matters about a thing is it or is it not conscious? That's what it means to center something, is where if I ask you, how are things going? And you say, oh yeah, nothing bad, you're centering bad stuff. You're talking about the presence or absence of bad stuff. If you say, oh, nothing so great, then you're centering good stuff, the presence or absence of good stuff. I lost track again. Oh, executive functioning. I usually get back there. So that's why we focus on executive functioning as opposed to subconscious or non-conscious. Sometimes I'll even use the word autonomic, although that one I don't tend to use as much because that has a specific medical meaning. Like that's used in anatomy to refer to specific processes that are autonomic. But we need a different word that doesn't center the fact that whatever we're talking about isn't conscious. That's what executive functioning is. There's what you consciously know, think, feel, observe, intend. And then there's way more than that that happens without your conscious awareness. You can't observe it, you can't control it, it just happens. And that stuff causes problems. Whenever what you are intending and what you end up doing are different, it's not because you secretly intended something that you were unaware of. The whole, again, definition of consciousness, definition of awareness or working memory or whatever, different phrases to all mean the same thing, is that cognitive space in which we can hold information that we can actively observe and manipulate. I have long-term memory. We know it because I can pull things up from it. But all the stuff that's in long-term memory, I can't actively do anything with. I'm not aware of it at the moment. It's stored somewhere, somehow. But I can retrieve it into awareness, consciousness, working memory, and that allows me to expand it and do something with it, notice it, take a lesson off it, theorize about it, connect it to something else, make projections about how it could be different, etc. So when we say awareness, consciousness, working memory, we're saying everything of which you are capable of observing in the cognitive space. If you're going to make an argument that there's something happening cognitively outside of your ability to observe it, no, that's not true. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes, right? That we assume that something is not worth noticing. Our brain assumes something's not worth noticing, and then someone else can say, oh, hey, have you noticed this pattern? And that can bring it to our attention. I've done this a million times, right? Until I say what I'm about to say 5 seconds from now, you're not aware, consciously aware in this moment of the feeling of the chair underneath you. And as soon as I said that, you became aware of that feeling. The data was always there. The sensors in the skin, the nervous system was picking that stuff up. It didn't turn off or suddenly appear. The information, the signals were being sent to the brain, and your brain, your executive functioning, the black box, the hypothetical stuff we can't observe, somehow, some way made a determination that that information was not worth taking up some of the limited space you have in consciousness. Most of the time we're right. Sometimes we're wrong, and we notice the times that we're wrong, much more than we notice the times we're right. Obviously, why would we pay attention to all the things that aren't? If there are 100 things in my field of view, but I can only consciously see 3 of them, and one of them is potentially going to kill me, that one is making it into the cut. It's going to be one of the 3. And the other 2 are going to be 2 of the 98 that are not problematic. And if there are 3 things that are dangerous, then I'm only seeing the 3 bad things. Even if the other 97 are fine, why would I prioritize looking at something that's not going to hurt me when there's something that might hurt me? So I better pay attention to it, right? I'm rambling on again, and I'm going to wrap up soon, but I do need to, like, for myself, put a bit of a button on it. So this messaging, this hyper-individual messaging, I don't find to be helpful. The idea that all of your problems are your fault, that if you fail to do a thing, it's just because you didn't try hard enough, didn't care enough, didn't really want it. You said you want it, but if you really wanted it, you would have done X, Y, and Z. No, you might really want it, but just not understand that doing X, Y, and Z is necessary to have it. So why would you do, if I told you, hey, if you really want to make some money, then you better go pull some leaves down off a tree and chew on them. Why would you do that? You need to see a connection. So if after the fact we could say, if you had eaten those leaves, you would have made money. Well, now, sure. But at the time, why would I do that? I need to see a connection, right? Let's see. I skipped some comments. We have a friend who can't see her therapist anymore because he keeps telling her that to not ruminate on what she can't do, and it just stresses her out more because he essentially just stopped doing that, which she would do if she could. So in particular there, the brain has no mechanism that allows it to think about or notice or be less aware, notice less, think about less, something, anything. There's no mechanism for that. The thought, I want to stop thinking about X, is itself a thought about X. And I don't just mean that if you think I shouldn't think a thing, then my response to that is to think it. No, the thought of not thinking it, I shouldn't think it, that is a thought. So no, you can't do that. What you can do is focus on other things. So this is assigning intent where there isn't any. She's obviously, her, keeps telling her. She's obviously not enjoying thinking about whatever she's ruminating on. She doesn't want to be thinking about it. So the assumption that he's making, the therapist, that if she's thinking about it, she must want to be. No, she's being very clear. She doesn't want to. Why would she talk to you about it, Mr. Therapist, if she really actually liked thinking about it? That's the therapist centering his experience. Oh, you just want to be able to talk about it because you want me to feel bad for you. You want people to, instead of her experience. She's saying, I don't want to think about it. He's saying, no, you obviously do. Who would know? So does she want to stop? Yeah. Does saying stop help? No, it actually makes it worse. Not only that, but then because it doesn't work, but the therapist keeps saying it, the client, your friend, is going to think, well, obviously some people can just stop. Otherwise, why would he tell me that? So what is it about me that makes it so I can't stop? So now it's not just the ruminating. Now I'm ruminating on why I'm a ruminator and what's wrong with me. Doesn't mean there's nothing that can be done. We have finite resources. So what we want to do, if you want to think less about whatever you're ruminating on, you have to spend those resources on other things. And there are actually really kind of simple and predictable things that you can do to get your attention to go elsewhere. You cannot actively choose to forget about or cease to be aware of a thing. You can actively choose to become more aware of something. So you do that until there's just no room left and the original thing gets bumped. And the more important that the original thing is, the harder that's going to be, because the new stuff has to be more important, more valuable to be aware of in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, it's not going to bump the first thing. If there's a hungry bear in this office trying to attack me, no matter how much I'm going to try and do mindfulness exercises and look for 5 red things, that's not bumping my awareness of the bear, because that is being determined that it's important. Again, sometimes that's inaccurate, but that's still a thing. What she needs is someone who can help her approach the problem in a way that works for her. Yeah, I'll come back to that real quick. I know I'm running long. I don't know. I'm doing that today for some reason. I've been trying lately to cut off future stress by focusing on the immediate task and problem at hand, which works a lot more for me than the concept of mindfulness, but it still requires active effort, which is difficult. But when it can, it does make the task at hand easier. Oh, good. So that's a cognitive reframe. We might call it's attaching meaning to something. In other words, if you say that you hate going to school, there's nothing I can do that's going to make it so that you love going to school. What I can do is help expand your definition of what going to school is, so that now you're seeing elements of things that you do enjoy within what you're calling going to school, or connect it to something else that you do want. But that means that the other thing that you do want has to have a value that's worth the cost of going to school. We don't just convince people to like things, but we can connect those things differently. I might not pull leaves off trees and eat them. There's leaves on the trees outside, obviously. I might not pull leaves down and eat them, but if you made a connection for me, if you convinced me that doing that would make me feel better and healthier and happier, then I might. Doesn't mean that I'm going to enjoy the process of eating the leaf any more than I would have otherwise. I just think it's worth doing because it's connected to another thing. So you're making new connections. So that might mean then that, yes, either you did have the resources available to be able to do the thing, but the value was lower than what it would cost you. So now you've upped the value by reframing it or connecting it to something else. Ooh, what benefit will this have for me in the future? I'm going to prevent future stress. Now it's worth doing. That still requires that you have the resources available, though. There are going to be times, no matter what you say, no matter how valuable you make it, you just can't afford it. So do I want to lift 100 pounds? No. Can I? Yeah. So if I see 100 pounds and there's no reason for me to do anything about it, I'm not going to lift it. Even if you tell me I should, why? But if you make it clear why I should or what you think will come of it, and I agree and I now connect it, oh, okay, then I'll do it. It costs me more than I would have done for no reason, but it's worth this value. But if it's 1,000 pounds, you can make it as valuable as you want. I'm not lifting it. The metaphor I use for this a lot is, imagine that I said to you, hey, would you like $1 million? I'm willing to give you $1 million. You're probably going to say, yeah, cool, thanks. And I say, great, I'll give you $1 million. All you got to do is give me $2 million first. Now you're going to say, no, thank you. Does that mean you don't want $1 million? No, you wanted it. You wanted it before, you want it now. You just don't want it enough to be willing to pay $2 million to get it. Why would you? So if I say, hey, do you want $1 million? And you say, yeah, sure. And I say, great, just give me $2 million first. And you say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Then I can say, oh, I guess you don't really want the $1 million. If you really wanted the $1 million, you would do what you needed to do to get it. And I'm just ignoring the fact that the cost obviously isn't worth the value there. And I might do that because I'm a jerk or manipulative or whatever, but that's generally, I'm doing that because for me, it wouldn't cost me $2 million. If I said, oh, I want $1 million and it only costs me $1,000 to get it, yeah, I'm doing it every time. And it costs you $2 million, but I'm going to assume it costs you $1,000 because that's what it costs me. So when you don't do it, I'm like, obviously you don't want it. It's only cost $1,000. I do it all the time. You have $1,000, you could do it too, not realizing that for you it's costing $2 million and therefore it doesn't make sense. But if I say, okay, fine, all right, you won't give me $2 million in exchange for $1 million, fine. You give me $2 million, I'll give you $3 million. Well, now I've raised the value, and now you'd be willing to do it because you get a bonus $1 million out of it. But you know what? You have to have the $2 million to give me first. So even though you now think it's worth doing, you want it, you even want it enough to be willing to pay the cost that you need to pay in order to get it, but you cannot afford the cost. You don't have it. If at that point I'm going to just keep making the value higher and higher, fine, give me $2 million, I'll give you $5 million. Okay, fine, I'll give you $10 million. At no point will you ever be able to do it because you don't have the money. And the more valuable I make it, the worse you're going to feel about your inability to afford it. This is a lot of what can be harmful and counterproductive in therapy and education and parenting and just any relationships, is we think, oh, we just got to make this valuable to the other person. And actually, the more valuable we make it, the worse they feel about their inability to do it. It doesn't actually make them able to do it. Because again, we're centering this idea that everything a person wants to do, they do, and therefore anything they don't want to, or anything they don't do, they didn't want to do. Not true. All of us at any given moment have way more things that we want to do than we can afford to do. I want to learn to play piano. I don't practice or learn or take lessons or whatever. Someday I might, but I don't right now, and I haven't, and I've wanted to learn piano for a long time. So are you going to call me a liar and say I don't actually want to learn to play piano because I'm not doing the things that I would need to do in order to learn it? Or are you going to understand that, sure, I want to play piano, but more than that, I want this and this and this. Learning to play piano is number 20 on my list of priorities. And in any given day, I'm lucky if I get past number 3. I want it. I just can't get to it. Other things I want even more that are even more important take my resources and I run out. So we can look at how to spend fewer resources on those upper things so that more is left to go down further into the priorities. Yeah, we can look at making it more important and bumping it on up the priority list. We can look at resolving things up here so that they become lower priority. There's lots of things that we can do, but none of it means that you didn't want it in the first place. Didn't want it enough. Technically, it's true. You didn't want it enough, meaning you didn't want it more than literally everything else that's taking the resources that you could have spent on this instead. Although even then, I want to fly without the use of any tools or machinery. I just want to soar into the air. Even if that was my top priority, it's not happening. So I don't know. It's nuanced, it's complicated, and that's why it's not fun. It's not. I mean, it is. I have fun with it, and people have fun with it, but it is draining and it is hard because the whole point is that you can't understand it. You can't understand some simple thing about yourself or the world or whatever. And, oh, this is why this thing keeps happening, because nothing in your life is ever repeated. We can look at patterns, obviously. Oh, this has this in common with this and this and that. But there are other variables that are different about it too. If nothing else, it's in a different time, right? You have a different number of previous experiences, whatever. It's all different. So in order to make it the same and make it simple, we have to ignore data. Oh, sure, this one happened 2 years later, but that's not relevant. It's still self-sabotage. It's the same thing, even though a lot of the specifics are different. We want it to be simple because that would be a simple fix. But there's no simple fix. And the nice thing is, it's because you don't need to be fixed. That doesn't mean that there's nothing in your life that's terrible or unpleasant or even unsustainable, damaging, fatal. Those things happen. It just means that there isn't a simple problem there where if you just knew how to blank, 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 if you could just get yourself to blank, blank, blank. I keep having this feeling, this sense in my stomach, and it starts out just as a little bit uncomfortable, but then it becomes more and more uncomfortable and eventually becomes very painful. And so I tell other people about it because I don't know what the hell's going on. And everybody tells me, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's called hunger. I experience it too. When you feel it, you got to eat. When you eat, you won't feel hungry. That's how you solve hunger, which is great. I'm glad I know that now. So I went and I ate, and it worked just like everybody said. I stopped, the pain went away. But then the next day it came back. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because I did what everybody else does. Everybody eats food. I did that. They said I should eat it. I did that, and it worked, but only for a little bit. I don't know what's wrong with me, that the thing that works for everybody else doesn't work for me. And please don't tell me to eat more food, because I already tried that and it didn't work. We want to resolve things so that we can just ignore them. The brain is a cognitive miser. It doesn't want to have to pay attention to things. Of course, it feels good to take a problem and change it in such a way that it never requires our attention again. And that's just not how life works. So that leads to all kinds of problematic stuff in therapy, especially when it comes to neurodiversity. Technical cost is the same, but the opportunity cost for the woman who lives... Oh, I missed one. My economics professor talks about that when teaching about opportunity costs. He used an example of a woman who loves a vase at an antique store but would have to spend her entire savings to get it, versus a random rich boy who doesn't like it that much but needs something to decorate the foyer. The technical cost is the same, but the opportunity cost for the woman who loves the vase is a lot higher. Yep. That's why a lot of this stuff is about perception. And yes, we are wrong. It might be that it was still worth it for her to buy the vase, because turns out the rich kid turned around and sold it for 3 times as much. And now she said, why didn't I? Because she didn't know that would be the case, right? We have to make our guesses about what's worth what. What else could I spend this resource on that might be worth more? Sometimes we're wrong. That's a lot of that FOMO stuff. I'm going to share one last thing, and I know I'm running really long, but I feel like I'm getting more into the stuff that might be helpful for the marketer here at the end. So I'm just kind of letting myself run with it. I didn't have a 2:00 session. The way that we approach working with people generally, we often talk about it as being specifically designed to help people who are neurodivergent. And that's true to an extent, but that's because it's specifically designed to help any individual, because it's about paying attention to that individual. We have lots of things we talk about there, and one of those things is it's a lot simpler to compare something against the average, the mean, your concept of other versions of that thing, than it is to embrace and understand the thing in the whole as itself. In other words, if I say, oh, I'm tall, I'm saying compared to most people, I have more height. And that's a true statement. If I say I am 6'5", it doesn't really matter what other people are or aren't. I'm just looking at what I am doing, whether that makes me tall or not. The first one is a lot simpler. It takes less information. I don't need to know exactly how tall you are. I don't need to measure you. I just can look and see, oh, compared to other people, you're taller. So I'm going to treat you like anybody else, except in the ways that I think I might need to modify because of the fact that you're tall. In other words, I'm treating you like a normal person who happens to be tall, average height person who happens to be tall. If I look at you and say, oh, how tall are you? Let's measure it. Oh, you're 6'5". Well, now I'm interacting with you the way I would interact with someone who is 6'5", not someone who's basically normal except taller. And that's not always worth it. There's a cost to that. It's not worth looking at the very specific and clear details of a particular individual. In therapy, I think it is. And in coaching, I think it is. And for each individual looking at themselves, I think that it is. But of course not as we go about our lives. You don't pay that close attention to every single person, every single thing. You can't. We're trying to identify what's worth it. So yes, this is better, and it is designed to work well for neurodivergent people because we're not comparing anybody against the concept of what a person should be, a normal person is. We're just looking at what's in front of us. Yeah, universal design. Yeah, it's not, here's what works for normal people, and this different set of things. In other words, those rules that they gave to normal people don't work for you. Well, it's because you're neurodivergent. So get rid of those rules, and here's the new set of rules that will work for you instead. No, they might. There's value in research. We utilize research. We build things based around, we scale things based around what is most likely to help. If most people do best with about 8 hours of sleep every night, and you're struggling and you're feeling tired, then it's worth saying, well, let's try and get 8 hours of sleep because that seems to help most people. Does that mean that it will resolve your problem? No. It just means that it's worth trying first because it helps most people. We wouldn't start by trying to have you get 13 hours of sleep because that doesn't seem to be necessary usually. Might it be for you? Yeah. But let's start with the simpler one and see if it works. And if not, then we get more complicated. And that's why I don't like comparing what we do to other people. It's not the same as other people except in whatever particular ways. I don't even know what other people do. But also, this is its own thing, as is every other thing. Comparing one to the other is simple and it's fast, and that's what marketing and advertising and all that stuff needs to be. I'm not looking down on it. It's just it leaves a lot of information out, which is why I struggle with it, because I don't like to do that. I don't like to say, well, it's basically this other thing except in this particular way. So yeah, it's designed for neurodivergent people because it is designed. Actually, Milton Erickson is a theoretician that I really respect, and one of his famous quotes was, "For every client, a new theory of therapy." Yeah. Why would I assume that the thing that helped another client is definitely going to help you? If it's helped many clients that have certain things in common that seem in common with you, then that is going to make me think that it's likely worth trying. Let's give it a shot. And if it does, cool. And if it doesn't, okay, so we were wrong. We had good reason to think it might work and try it first, but it didn't. So now let's move on. The simplest answer that works is the best one. I'm not trying to tear anything down. If you say, I'm struggling to get things done, and you get the advice, well, just make a list, which is probably the most common advice, right? Just make a list, write it all down. If that works for you, great. Why would you think more deeply about it if something that simple worked for you? So start with the simplest thing. If it doesn't work for you, you have to know that there's more complexity, and that's the sticky answer that I never resolved completely, right? Let's take a very common example. Oh, I'm so exhausted. I'm so tired. I hate this. This is a problem. It's different than I want it to be. So what do I need to change so that I don't feel this way anymore? You know what? I didn't get enough sleep last night. Tonight, I'm going to bed early. That'll work. And then the nighttime rolls around, and for whatever reason, I don't go to bed early. Who knows why? Maybe it's hard to fall asleep. Maybe I get busy. Maybe whatever. Doesn't matter. Doesn't happen. So the next day, I'm exhausted again and feel bad again. But I have a sticky answer. The brain doesn't spend resources without a reason. If I have a problem, I'm tired, and I already came up with a solution, go to bed early. Laughing at the comments. I'm tired. That's the problem. I've already done the cognitive work to come up with a solution, go to bed early. That will work. Okay. And theoretically, it would if I can do it. But then I don't do it. That's the executive function. I intend to go to bed early. That's my theory about what will resolve the problem. Problem being tired. Theory, if I go to bed early, it will be resolved. And then I need to execute the theory, the executive function. If something goes wrong there and I don't execute it, then the sticky answer is the next day I'm going to say the same thing because it is theoretically accurate, even though it's practically unuseful, unhelpful. Okay, tonight I'm really going to go to bed early, and then I don't. The next day I'm exhausted. Tonight I'm really going to go to bed early. Are there any other things that you could do that might help you to feel less exhausted? Of course. I don't know what might work specifically, but there's lots of things to try besides going to bed early. But as long as you're stuck on the sticky answer, the thing that theoretically would work, even though in practice it doesn't, then my brain will not look for any other solutions. It has a solution. The new problem now is, how do I get myself to enact the solution? So now I'm thinking about that. Not what do I need to do, but how do I get myself to do the thing I know I need to do? But there might be other solutions that are much, much easier. You just can't look at them because your brain has an answer, the sticky answer. So yes, a lot of the time we're trying to take away the sticky answer, not to replace it with a new set of rules for neurodivergent people, but just to be clear, hey, that thing that you're thinking might work, it hasn't. And might it? Yeah, but it hasn't. So maybe it's worth looking at what else might. And all I've got to do is help clarify for you that while that answer might be useful, might theoretically be useful, and is theoretically accurate, there's value in looking for other answers anyway. And once that happens, you look for answers. And of course, I help and I guide your attention and do things. But rather than just 1 hour a week, you're working with me and we explore things together, you are looking at different things, observing different things, trying new things that you haven't been trying. You don't have to just, we come up with something, go try it, a week later you come back, we come up with something new. You can iterate on your own because you're observing it now. So that's why we try and take away the sticky answer. And the stickiest of all sticky answers is, I just need to try harder. I don't like this thing. How do I fix it? Well, if I try harder, if I do more, if I cared more, if I wasn't so lazy, if I wasn't so bad, broken, anxious, overthinking, whatever. Some version of, if I just was different, thought different, felt different, then it wouldn't be an issue. We all have those sticky answers and they're theoretically accurate. If I could just get myself to do it, then I could do it. Sure. But what does that mean? And if it doesn't enable you to do anything different, let's look at something else that might. So we don't ever, and I'm talking we generally, but yes, we here at Effective Artistry, we don't ever want to make promises to people about what will or won't happen, regardless of whether we're correct about those guesses and promises. And yeah, I actually can make a lot of guesses that turn out to be accurate at a very high rate. Doesn't matter. If we do that, it reinforces the sticky answer that the problem is you, which means that your brain won't look at any other factors. And it doesn't mean that the problem isn't you or never is you or you have no impact on it. It just means, why would you look outside of yourself? If you can find something in yourself that is the problem, that's what I'm going to focus on, and therefore won't notice anything else that might also impact it and might be a lot easier to shift, or might not, or whatever, but how would we know until we look? So the last metaphor I'll share is the one I talk about in terms of helping people who are neurodivergent. But again, this is about helping any individual. It's just that it's helpful to neurodivergent people to finally have a way to move forward or work on things, an approach and a methodology that doesn't treat them as modified neurotypical people, normal people except for this, particularly normal people except deficient in this way, which most of the theories are based on. Even you've been injured and we've got to heal you. Mental health, you're broken in some way, we've got to heal you. It's better than certain other ways of looking at it, certainly, but it still makes the problem you. That if we can heal you, it's just that there's something in you that's broken and we can fix it. We don't do that. We just want to know what's worth trying. We want to be honest and authentic about what life is and how it's chaotic. And what we specifically want to do as experts, as people who are charging money to try to be helpful, is we need to be ready to go as complex as necessary. If somebody's going to say to me that they're struggling to get something done, I might say, make a list. And then if they say, I tried that, it hasn't worked, then I need to know where to go next and where to go next. And what we do here, as you can probably tell from me talking for an hour and a half now at this point, I'm ready to go as complex as anybody needs to. And yes, sometimes that even gets down into like ridiculous, abstract, philosophical, metaphysical philosophy about what is the nature of reality and cognition and existence and whatever. Not often, but sometimes we get there. So here's the metaphor. Remember, cognitive miser, finite resource, all these things. If you're standing at the base of a set of stairs talking to someone who's using a wheelchair and they say, hey, I really need to get up to the second floor. Do you know how I can get up there? Then you might say, yeah, the stairs are right here. They take you right up there. And if they say, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't. The stairs won't work for me. Do you know another way I could get up there? No, The stairs will work. I take the stairs all the time. The stairs work fine. Literally everybody I know who goes up to the second floor takes these stairs. They work fine. No, they won't work for me. So do you know anything else? I don't understand what you're saying. They work fine. What do you mean they don't work for you? It kind of just seems like you don't really want to go up there. Are you just trying to get me to go up there for you? I know they work, right? That's a typical response because you're not paying very close attention to the other person, because why would you? Because your brain is a cognitive miser and doesn't want to. If you pay enough attention, you might say, oh, I see why it doesn't work. That's still you making assumptions. Or you might even better say, oh, okay, it doesn't work. You might ask questions and want justification. That's very common. Oh, why can't you get started on this? Oh, you have ADHD? Okay, that's okay. No, I don't need justification. You don't need to tell me you have ADHD. You tell me it's not working. Why would I think that I know better about your experience than you? I don't need to know why. I might want to ask questions about why later when we're trying to figure out what other things could happen that might be able to get you up to the second floor. In that case, it might be important to know why the stairs didn't work in the first place. Because otherwise I might say, oh, well, if these stairs don't work, we can go use these stairs over here. And then it might be more important to understand why stairs don't work so that I can switch to something else. But not as a default. As a default, you tell me and I listen. I'm not going to say, well, if you really wanted to get up there, you could get up there on these stairs. Instead, I'm going to say, oh, okay. Now, normally, people who pay enough attention and are generous and understanding, at that point, you're going to say something like, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, I don't know another way to go up there because I've always taken the stairs. So if those don't work for you, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I don't know what other options there might be. Because again, why would that person spend resources? But if you're close with the person or have reason to, or in this case, are their therapist and are getting paid, that's your job, that is valuable, then instead I don't say, oh, okay, the stairs don't work for you. Well, those stairs over there will, or whatever other solution might. First, I'm going to say, okay, have you ever gotten up to the second floor in the first place? And if so, how did that happen? Maybe I can help you there. Or I might ask questions and you might clarify enough for me to understand, oh, okay, you need an elevator or a ramp or something like that. Okay, I don't know where one is because I haven't had to use it myself. I've always taken the stairs. But I do know about like engineering and architecture. So I can walk around the building with you and look around and say, if there was going to be an elevator, and I don't know that there is, but if they put one in this building, based on what I'm seeing, it likely would be over there. So let's go check over there together first. And if it's there, great. And if it's not there, okay. Now here's my second best idea. And if you have something else, you tell me and we'll look at your idea. But until then, I think if it was going to be somewhere that wasn't this, it might be, we just try it. And it does help, yes, that I am neurodivergent and all of our practitioners are neurodivergent. That's a shortcut, right? Sometimes it is, oh yeah, I can't take the stairs either, so I already know where the elevator is. But that has its own danger too, because if you think, oh, well, it worked for me, it'll work for you too, then when we get to the elevator and it doesn't work, it's the same problem all over again. No, this works. It works for me. Instead of, okay, this doesn't work either, let's keep going. Just like the research, it's good and helpful to know what might be worth trying first, what's most likely to happen because it's worked for other people with certain things in common. Doesn't mean that it will. And if we talk like it should, then you'll feel bad if it doesn't. And the more work that we do, the worse we'll both feel if what we decided might work doesn't work. So it's an iterative process. You look, you observe what's happening. You take that information, you come up with an idea of what to do differently, what's worth trying, you try it, and you observe what happens. And if it goes the way you want it, cool, keep doing it until it stops going the way you wanted it. Sometime sooner or later, it's going to stop. Some context will make it not work. And if it doesn't, cool, okay, now I have observed that. Now I know that's not an option, and that gives me a little bit more clarity about the kinds of things that might or might not work. All right, I'm going to stop. 90 minutes. I feel bad for, maybe I'll try and help edit it down or point them at a time marker or whatever. I'm just throwing a lot of stuff out there. This is why executive functioning matters. People overfocus on conscious intention and ignore the fact that sometimes we're just wrong. And does it suck to be wrong? Yeah, I mean, to varying degrees, sometimes a mistake doesn't really cause that much of a problem. Sometimes it's the end of everything. Do we want to be wrong? No. Do we enjoy being wrong? No, to varying degrees. But we're wrong all the time. If we get mad about the fact that we were wrong and think it means something about us, now we're trying to fix that I'm the kind of person who is sometimes wrong. I got to be a kind of person who's never wrong. Instead of just saying, oh, that's what I missed. Let me try that next time. That's why executive function matters. Why we're doing therapy the way that we do it is because for each client, a new theory of therapy. We don't know what will work. And unless we're very clear about that, because I'm charming and well-spoken and I do help people quite a bit. There's a lot of feedback about that and people talk about it with each other and recommend me and blah, blah, blah. People are going to come in and say, oh, good, this guy finally knows how I can resolve whatever. And I don't. I'm pretty good at helping people figure it out. But the only thing I can promise you is that we can always come up with something new to try. I can't promise you what will work. We look at the individual. We're honest and authentic about what we're capable of doing, that things don't need to be perfect to be useful. Things can be useful, have utility, grateful for that, take the value from it, and also flawed and wrong and harmful in other contexts. The fact that the stairs work for most people, the fact that the stairs don't work for you, doesn't mean that the stairs have no value. It just means that there's limits to that value. No solution has to be perfect and unassailable. There isn't one. Thank you. Thank you in the chat. There were 3 questions I was supposed to answer. That was 2. What was the third one? Oh, what makes our work helpful to neurodivergent people? We pay attention. If I'm an expert in any diagnosis, OCD, well, I know a lot about OCD. So when I meet somebody new, all I'm looking for is, do they have OCD or not? I'm looking for the minimal markers. My brain is looking for the minimum information necessary to determine, do they have OCD or not? Because if they do, then I don't need to pay attention to them anymore. Here's the stuff that works for people that have OCD. And if it doesn't work for you, it's because you're doing it wrong. Because I help lots of people with OCD. This stuff works. You're just doing it wrong. And if you don't, oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, that's not in my expertise, but I can refer you to somebody else. That kind of, the more of an expert someone becomes, the less incentive they have to actually pay attention because they know a lot. Why, if I can only hear 2 words out of the 10 that you are saying and still basically get what you mean, then why would I listen to the other 8? What we do is that we come in knowing we don't know anything, that I have to pay very deep and close attention to you, including, yes, specific wording and phrases. And my interpretation of that doesn't mean that it's correct, but it does mean that I can put out to you, you phrased it this way, which I am interpreting to mean that you think the difference between you doing it and you not doing it is just whether you can convince yourself, even though in the same sentence you said you didn't have the energy. So I don't know if that's what you were intending, but that's how I'm interpreting it. Draw your attention to it, Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Just pay attention. If something's not working, pay more attention. If something's bothering you, try and find another way. If something's not working, try and find another way. What's worth trying? I don't know. This is why I'm terrible at marketing. 95 minutes now. Thank you, everybody. Good to be here. I appreciate being active in the chat. And Patrick Rothfuss has seen my name in a chat before. Well, that just made my day. I have to know more about that. Please tell me more about that. Was it just in a chat that he was looking at, or he actually saw it? Because that's pretty cool. Anyway, Patrick Rothfuss, fantasy author. I love him. Great. Thank you all for being here. We'll be here next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time. And be well.